On the 30th of November, Floyd sent out a text to a whole bunch of people saying Psalm 30 for the 30th of November. And I read it, and as soon as I read it, I thought, this is what I need to preach on this weekend. Especially since we have the hope candle that we just lit. And that is the reason why I read the verses that I just read, because this is the hope that we have. This is the hope in God that we have. And the funny thing is that I believe that Psalm 30 does not use the word hope in it. But the thing is that it's all hope. And I hope you don't mind, but I'm going to equate this to some of my own life because that's the only life that I get to live. So I kind of have to not only, I'll try to put my own thoughts into it. And when we begin with Psalm 30, it says, a psalm for the dedication of the temple of David. So we are pretty much of the believing that David wrote this psalm. And he wrote it for the dedication of the temple. Verse 1, I will exalt you, O Lord, for you have lifted me out of the depths and did not let my enemies gloat over me. He didn't mention hope, but isn't it amazing how his hope is in God? God did not let his enemies gloat over him. He lifted him out of the depths. David's saying, I may have been down low, but you rose me up. You gave me hope. And to me, this is a psalm. There's so much of the Bible. Again, and going back to last week, we can get into these people's heads because this is what they wrote to us. When I originally moved into my truck, I had a really good job at a top 100 golf course. I quit drinking. I quit smoking weed. I quit smoking cigarettes. I quit chewing tobacco. I quit everything. I was like, let's be the perfect Christian Pharisee. I'm not exactly sure what to call me. But the thing is, the reason why, if I look back on those days, the thing that really changed my life was none of that. It was the simple fact that I turned to God. That is the thing that changed everything. I turned to God. There is one sin that we go to hell for, and that is turning to God. Or not turning to God, I'm sorry. That is our sin that we don't go to hell, that we go to hell for. If we turn to God, just take a look at David. David messed up time after time after time, in our opinion. But is David in hell?
No.
I can't say that he is or not. Probably not. I agree with you. He's probably in heaven. But the thing is that why did he go to heaven? Because he turned to God. And hopefully, I will continue to turn to God, and I will go to heaven as well. Doesn't mean that I'm supposed to go sin, but this is a totally different subject. That's a different, we could go there a different day, and I'm sure we will. But today we're trying to talk about hope. And here, hope is not even mentioned. But we can see the hope that David had in his head. O Lord, this is verse 2 of Psalm 30. O Lord, my God, I called to you for help, and you healed me. David had hope. God, please help me. And God healed him. Because he had hope. He had faith. He had that love of God. When I was in my truck at first, I did not understand. It's like, man, it's like all these people are telling me it's like you're doing everything right, and yet God is just trying to squash you. But I came to learn that that wasn't the point. God was trying to teach me hope. The same here. Oh Lord, I called to you for help, and you healed me. When I look back, it's like I would look back on time. I've talked before. It's like, God has been going in this path, so I have to continue on this path. And when I would look back, it's like, okay, God put me here so I could learn something. And what was I learning? I was learning hope. I was learning to say the same thing that David said. "Oh Lord, my God, I look to you for help and you healed me." And that is what God did with me. Recently, I got to talk to somebody who has been living in the back of their truck, and I said, "Okay, I've done that." And they say, "Oh, out in this weather?" And it's like, "No, I did it all winter long for like 7 winters. So you got a long way to go until you catch up to me." Yes, I've done that. But the thing is that if you're turning to God, God will teach you. God will heal you, and He will teach you to have that hope. Verse 3, "O Lord, you brought me up from the grave. You spared me from going down into the pit." I wish Betty were here so bad today. She likes when I read from the Bible, and she likes that a lot. Betty's awesome. "O Lord, you brought me up from the grave. You spared me from going down into the pit." Here's David. He's saying, man, I don't know if you know the story of David, but David, here he was blessed to be the king, and yet years and years it took him to ever be a king. He ran around, he was basically, some would say an outlaw. King Saul chased him down, tried to kill him. He didn't exactly have the best reputation of everybody around, because he was running basically a renegade group of people, and yet God had blessed him already and anointed him as king, and yet he wasn't a king. The king, who the people were saying was the king, was hunting him down, trying to kill him. It's like such a twisted event of affairs. It's like the only kind of thing that only God could create this situation. You are the anointed king, and yet the king, in people's opinion, is trying to kill you right now. And yet David is having hope in God, that God is going to be the one that saves him. To me, I read this, and it's just amazing how much hope that David had. And then people say, well, I don't understand. The Bible also says that David is a man after God's own heart. And people say, well, I don't understand how that could be. And it's like, look at the way that he trusted God. Look at the way that when he was being hunted down, he still had that hope that God spared him, that God cared about him, that God loved him. Verse 4, "Sing to the Lord, you saints of his. Praise his holy name." Not only while you're being hunted down are you supposed to be praising God, but you're supposed to be singing. You're supposed to be happy. You're supposed to be joyful. I think that's next week. We could do this again. It's wonderful. But it's that hope that is where God is taking us and leading us and challenging us to be able to get there. When I was living in my truck, I went to talk to pastor after pastor after pastor to try to understand what was going on. And the pastors would say, sometimes, most of the time, well, you just have to have hope in God. And it's like, okay, so what am I supposed to hope for? Where's my hope? What am I supposed to hope for? And none of them could tell me what I was supposed to hope for. And that kind of irritated me, to tell you the truth, because, they should be able to give me some kind of an answer. But the thing is that, and I know I'm talking kind of fast today, I'm in that mode. I'm sorry. I hope you all understand. Can you understand? Can you hear me? Good. Okay. But hope in God is not hoping for something. It's not only hoping to get out of the pit. It's not only hoping to be healed. It's just hope. It's that hope that God is with you. That He's right there beside you. It's that hope that He can hear you. The hope that when you're laying there, you may be alone and there may be nobody else. But it doesn't matter because you have God. Verse 5, "For his anger lasts only a moment, but his favor lasts a lifetime. Weeping may remain for a night, but rejoicing comes in the morning." You hear that a lot. But how many times do you wake up in the morning and you're like, yeah, I'm all better. Guess what? You're usually not all better. You wake up in the back of the truck when it's minus 14 degrees out, and you don't even want to get out of your sleeping bag because all you have is ice encrusted all around you from your breath. And guess what? It's cold. It's miserable. But God woke you up. God is with you. God will be with you. That is the thing. Rejoicing comes in the morning. God is there. He hears you. There is always hope. I have to go back here because this is Psalm 27:13. I am still confident of this. I will see the goodness of the Lord in the land of the living. Wait for the Lord. Be strong and take heart and wait for the Lord. That is Psalm 27:13 and 14. I imagine that you're writing that down. I am still confident of this. I will see the goodness of the Lord in the land of the living. Wait for the Lord. Be strong and take heart and wait for the Lord. Even I hear something and I'm mostly deaf. I don't know what that is. I think it's a buzzer in the back. That is the hope that we can have in God. That confidence that He is there. The land of the living. That we woke up in the morning and God is there. We can have that confidence in Him. It is amazing how He's always there. The one thing that I have always learned is that God is alive and well. I don't know if y'all ever saw the movie God's Not Dead. I think that's the name of it. Something like that. It's a song anyway. And God is alive and well. When we pray to Him, like we talked about last week with Paul, we can see, and we rely on Him, and we have hope on Him, we can see that God is alive and well. And I see so many things on the internet, on Facebook and stuff, that people say, oh yeah, he's this and he's that, and he's not real. And it's like, you never stepped back and humbled yourself to see just who He is. And just how awesome and amazing He can be. When I felt secure, this is verse 6 of Psalm 30. When I felt secure, I said, I will never be shaken. Verse 7. O Lord, when you favored me, you made my mountain stand firm. But when you hid your face, I was dismayed. That's what I was talking about with Scarlett. And Nellie's sitting over there right now. And Nellie's like, where are you at? Why aren't you here? But guess what? I am right here. And I will be right back. It may take me another half hour, but I am here. But the thing is God is always there. And He may not just sit there and pat you on the back and say, yes, you're my little baby, and I'm here all the time for you. Sometimes you just have to stand up and be like, I know that God is here. I know He is with me. And that is the confidence that I talked about in that I read in Psalm 27. That is that confidence. I know that He is here with me. I have that strength. I have that knowledge. I know it. When we live by that we know it, that is when we can start praying like Paul, like I talked about last week, that we know this is the case. To you, O Lord, I called to the Lord and I cried for mercy. This is verse 8. Verse 9. What gain is there in my destruction, in my going down into the pit? Will the dust praise you? Will it proclaim your faithfulness? That's a way that I normally don't talk to God. But David seemed to do it regularly. David basically said, you can kill me off, and who's going to praise you? The dust that I go back to is not going to praise you, but I will make sure you get glory. And sometimes in the Old Testament we can see that God reacts to that. And I won't even go there because I might offend people. But realistically, that comes over and over again in the Old Testament. To me, I think that is a way of saying to God, I have confidence in you. Please don't let me down. I'm asking you to do this, and if you do this, I will make it to your glory as much as I possibly can. And honestly, I think that God responds to that, not because he needs us to give him that glory, but because we actually care enough to give him that glory. And I think that it's kind of like your parents or anything else. It's like, you know, Dad, if you do this for me, I'll make sure you get the credit, or something like that. It's difficult for me to explain in my head. I hope you understand what I'm saying. But that idea comes over and over again. It's just kind of like when we talked about probably a month or so ago when Moses was going into the desert, and they were saying, you know, what benefit are you going to have if you kill us all off when the people wouldn't go into the promised land? And they said, well, what benefit are you going to have if you kill us all off? Because then people are just going to say, you were too weak to sustain us. And so God said, okay, I'm not going to kill you all off. Y'all are just going to walk around the desert for 40 years. So, same kind of concept. Verse 10. Hear, O Lord, and be merciful to me. O Lord, be my help. Verse 11. You turned my wailing into dancing. You removed my sackcloth and clothed me with joy. When they would be mourning, they would wear sackcloth. And God was obviously merciful to him. And David was just continuing to turn to God in hope. And he clothed him with joy. God said, yes, you are blessed. Have this. It's just wonderfully amazing. Verse 11, you turned my wailing, verse 12, that my heart may sing to you and not be silent. O Lord my God, I will give you thanks forever. And then people wonder why David, who broke pretty much every one of the 10 Commandments, was a man after God's own heart. Because he was seeking God. He was loving God. He had hope in God. He had faith in God. Was he perfect? No. But as far as I know, there's nobody here that is. So, when we want to question why David was so messed up in the way that we perceive people to be messed up, we need to look at where his heart was coming from. And just like with Paul last week, we can get into David's head here and we can say, look at the hope. The hope. The reason why we just lit a candle. The hope that Paul had in God. It's just absolutely amazing to me that even when he was at his lowest, he always had hope in God. And the reason for that is because he did sleep out there on a rock for years after years. And he did have to fight for his life. And he did have to just do one thing. He had to turn to God over and over and over and over. And not everybody gets to experience that. Sometimes it's easy to have, and I think this is the reason why Jesus says it's easier for, what's the eye of the needle? Help me. I totally changed my thought. It's easier for camel to go through the eye of a needle than a rich man to go to heaven. Yeah. It came to my head, but it just wasn't there. But I mean, it's the same idea. It's the same idea. Here you had a guy that was nothing, that was being chased down by the king, that the king was trying to destroy. And yet he was the one that was anointed by God. He was the one that for years turned to God and had hope. And the candle that we light today symbolizes that hope. And this is the first time I have ever done a quote-unquote Lenten service. Advent, I'm sorry. you see how good I am at that. But Advent service. But as I was reading about hope, it's like one of the reasons why they originally lit these candles, and apparently the hope candle was not originally a hope candle. The reason why they lit the candles was that it would bring more light to the house each week. And the last candle was the idea of Jesus bringing all the light. So, as we look at that hope, we look at that light, and we look at that being brought into us, and that's what David did. David lived that life. He lived that hope, he lived that faith, he lived that love. And it's not my challenge, but that's what God calls all of us to do. And I think I'm running long. But that's okay, because 2 weeks ago I was like 6 minutes, and last week I was like 12 minutes. So this week I figured I'd make up for it. So Mark has to go. So we need to live that hope. We need to understand that we are not perfect. But guess what? Jesus is, he died for us. He washed our sins. We're going to be celebrating his birth. We have his hope. Let's move forward in it. Amen.